They assured us that it was over and that the hotel tape was the last one. But after what happened in the courtroom, no one was ready for Chrissy to cry. Didn't deny that she addressed the judge directly and said the words that caused everyone in the room to stop breathing. It wasn't an isolated incident. Love with Cameron Jim just stared at her as if he were seeing a stranger dress up as his fiancée, without even flinching or moving. Mama Jones shouted. The Cameron slumped back in the corner with his arms folded, as though he already knew what she was going to say, that it wasn't a leak, that it wasn't reality TV. As the judge dropped his pen, was a bomb. Chrissy removed the pin herself, and there were no camera scripts or other recordings of the following two segments. A private email exchange, an A in her voicemail. Chrissy implores Mona Scott to take down the movie, but it's too late since the truth is now out and it's playing in 4K. You won't believe what she says next, though. Would change everything you believe to be true. Chrissy stood up in the courtroom, her hands shaking, her lips streaked with mascara, and the world came to a stop. Miss Lampin was only asked a simple question under oath by the court. Before we go on to the evidence, is there anything more you would want to share? Expecting her to say that. So she cleared her throat, adjusted the microphone, looked at Jim, and let out the shocking and unfiltered truth. That immobilized half the room wasn't just an emotional error. I was in a relationship with Cameron that wasn't just a fling or a hookup, full on, and she said it as like she were telling the truth. Jim replied nothing, as though regret had already consumed all of her previous words. One moment, he was Jim Jones, of Harlem King, pinning the dips at legend The Devoted Ride or Death, and suddenly he sat there as if someone had unplugged the person completely. Was just another individual in a courtroom getting scolded by the woman he founded a whole business. You could hear the court clerk Cameron sitting there, inside, 2 rows behind sunglasses, his head cocked slightly as though he had seen a ghost and knew this moment was coming. Maybe he did. Perhaps this was There were signs that the USB clip cam leak last month wasn't just a sneak peek, Chrissy, so let's not act like it happened suddenly. At 9:13 p.m., Reggie, wearing a hoodie, unlocks the door to the Marin Hotel, brings wine glasses, soft music, and a cushion, and they talk about drowning in someone else's life. But what really made the internet go crazy was Chrissy's voice saying that Jim still believes I met my cousins, who are so simple. Fast forward to Cameron. Chrissy simply got on the stand and told the world she was with him today, and we're discovering that it wasn't even Reggie who was at the motel. The courtroom froze, but Mama Jones sprang up so fast that Christy, the security guard, didn't flinch. She grabbed both of her arms and said, "You snake, you." She appeared worn out, but neither depressed or regretful after telling the judge that she was prepared to provide her own evidence. "Snake, you destroyed my son," even wept. Screenshots of burner phones and travel logs to support what Cam had previously said, which she called the unfinished truth, as though it were when she was ready to tell the story. Jim's lawyer, who had been silent the entire time, got up and leaned forward, making matters worse. Microphone and stated, "Your Honor, in light of this new admission, we would like to file an immediate motion for fraud, emotional abuse, and brand sabotage. Let's talk about it." This was a business disaster rather than just a cheating scandal, since in addition to being based on love, the Jim and Chrissy machine was also made money through commercial collaborations, VH1 specials, spin-offs, and podcasts, rumors about an amazing wedding that sold out interviews and tickets, and now everything is tumbling because the foundation was fake since the woman Jim called his. How did we get here? According to sources, it didn't start with Reggie or Cam. Rather, it started with him giving information to his opponent while testifying in court. Chrissy claimed to have told producers, "I'm not here to be ignored," because she wanted more control over the narrative and more power in the industry. Whether you believe it was retaliation, Cam returned to the scene at that point. "I'm building mine," his accessory. According to court records, Chrissy's connection with Cameron was not a one-time recovery. In fact, there were 8 Chrissy claimed to have seen Cam discreetly or often over the course of 2 years, including hotel check-ins. According to Cam's legal team, he now has 2 unregistered flights and meals, reservations, a USB drive, further films, and a voicemail that Chrissy records telling Mona Scott that Cam can't know he'll use it. Please, make sure the video is removed. Also, keep in mind that Cam leaked, so you're probably asking where Jim is in all of this since he hasn't spoken anything in public. However, Witnesses reported that his hands were shaking when his lawyer offered him a stress ball, and he never made eye contact. His quiet in the courtroom was deafening, communication with Chrissy during her entire testimony, and to be honest, how could he? This isn't only a treaty, this is surgical grief. Your most ferocious enemy became the safe refuge for your daughter, and the man you had traveled with before had secrets she wouldn't even share at home. Now that the world knows, it weighs heavily on. As the judge asked if anybody else had heard Chrissy's evidence, Cameron's attorney got up, brandishing a brown fur, and strode forward, shouting, "We have another footage that is dated, and in those 7 sentences that made everyone in the room pause again, Cameron's lawyer didn't have to raise his voice. We have further footage, and it said the judge didn't flinch while submitting it to the court." Those 7 words were enough to completely alter the atmosphere of the courtroom. "Clerk," he said softly, but he could sense the tension in his neck. The lad walked to the seat as like he were walking a bomb, which he may have been since, as the everyone, realized that this was a demolition, and not just a sideshow when the folder hit the judge's hand. And Chrissy's appearance abruptly changed. Her eyes fell to the ground, her mouth quivered, and her blank stare broke as though she already knew what was in that envelope, because maybe she remembering what she had stated on the tape. The judge pulled out a USB from the folder, looked at the 2 legal teams, and declared, "I want this plate now, no delays." While Jim's lawyer did not voice any complaints, Cam's lawyer nodded, but Chrissy's lawyer was hurriedly screaming in her ear that she just shook her head, saying, "No, it's fine. Let it play." The projector. After the screen was removed and turned on, there was static and stillness, and Chrissy was seated with someone off in a studio trailer with her hair wrapped and makeup free. I know Jim is loyal, but loyalty doesn't make boredom go away. Her voice is sharp, and the camera is quiet, honest, and fatigued. "I'm off camera if this leaks, Mama knows." The other speaker says, "It's Yon Dandy Smith, girl. You're playing with fire." You know Cam despises him. Chrissy sips her drink and utters the words that sent shockwaves through the courtroom, and I was caught once I spoke my mind. It's not just a dispute, it's war. Way out, but I won't lie this time. The screen becomes black, the court freezes, Jim remains still, and his lawyer appears to have been robbed of oxygen. Mama Jones was sobbing, and the court was completely silent. But this was not the irascible, angry kind from before heartbreak. She muttered under her breath that she knew what she was doing. Chrissy just sat there, her face expressionless, as though she had already come to terms with her role in this story. "But it wasn't complete since the judge turned Manon. Are you speaking in this footage?" she asked. "Yes, sir." He asked again. "This is from an unedited Love and Hip Hop video, was filmed on location," and she answered this time without hesitation. The court then proceeded to VH1's attorney, who was in the room now, perspiring, asking, why was this footage not submitted in the original? While scrawling into phones, Sopon requested the VH1. The judge paused, saying, "We didn't know it existed. It was caught by an off-scheduled crew member and wasn't entered into our system." An eyebrow, but Miss Smith and Ants Lannon are openly discussing the likely repercussions of elite stuff and acknowledging its existence. Feeling as like Cameron is closing in on everyone who is still watching, as if it were a showy executive. Produced, Jim Chrissy is still stuck in calm compliance followed, and then the real kicker, Cam's attorney, got back up. "One more thing, Your Honor," he said. "This is a voicemail from 2 weeks prior to that. N. Lampin supplied film to N. Scott Young. A file was played, and Chrissy's voice was heard again, terrified, saying, 'Mona, I too need you to handle that. Room footage, because I told you that if Jim discovers that the entire season has been ruined, Cam won't know, and he'll take advantage of it.'" The courtroom lost it, Reggie cursed, and a man in the gallery virtually got up and said, It took 3 minutes for everyone to settle down when the court blasted the gavel order, and by that time the damage had already been done. Mama was a fixer. Wasn't simply cheating anymore, it was also a cover-up, production manipulation, and attempt to taint evidence in the midst of a legal battle. VH1's attorney appeared to be seeing his career take off before his eyes. Jim got to his feet, and nobody saw that his attorney was trying to stop him, but he shrugged. Putting him aside, he looked at everyone, inhaled deeply, moved 3 paces closer, and asked Chrissy in a hushed voice if any of this was true. It was true. Jim nodded, then turned back to Jim and sat down at the table. The air was like fog, and Chrissy's lips were apart and she blinked. The silence was harsher than a slap. He didn't react or wince when his lawyer whispered something in his ear, so he pulled out a piece of paper and gave it to him, saying, "Your Honor, Mr. Jones would want to file a motion to countersuit Miss Lampkin for grand fraud, willful deception, and emotional distress." "You're filing now?" the lawyer asked, seeming shocked. "Yes, today." However, the judge was about to take a break for break when a clerk entered the courtroom carrying the sealed package from Homeland Security, proving that the shocks weren't over yet. The judge opened it, read it slowly, and then looked up as he said gently, "The courtroom was puzzled, Homeland. This court has been informed that Anne Lampkin is also being investigated for obstruction, and Chrissy's lawyer said the information and continuing charity fraud prosecution raised an objection, which is outside the purview of this case and was not addressed in previous sessions. Having it will take a half-hour break, but we'll face this chaos and anarchy." The Mona Scott squad appeared prepared to vanish into thin air in VH1. They started compiling documents as though they were prepared to be subpoenaed themselves, and Cam simply smiled since this was no longer about Jim. Was the slow-motion explosion of a whole firm, one confession at a time, and even with the extra footage written on the brown folder, it wasn't empty because, in the final phrase on the page, Cam's attorney gave the judge another item, a text log from a burner phone that was registered to Reggie. She added, "She will deny it if the tape is released, but I'm done defending her. Let Cam have it." People stayed in the courtroom for the whole 30 minutes of the break. Seemed like 3 hours. They walked in silence and stared at Chrissy as if she were a villain on reality TV. Just sprang off the screen in real life. Jen Jones didn't glance at the judge, the press, or even Mama Jones, who was seated behind him. Instead, she gripped a tissue as though it were the last threat to her sanity, but Cam just sat there in a chilly calm as though he knew the credits were about to roll. He didn't blink, move, or speak. When the court reopened, the tension was so high that it felt as though sound couldn't travel through the screen, and his name would be the last one displayed. The court will now review the final item filed, the text log taken from a burner phone when the judge returned and set down his documents without further delay, connected to a man named Reggie, who carefully read from the page. She said, "If the clip falls, I'm done defending her, so let's have it. Let them all burn," and then the second message appeared. Chrissy thought it would be buried forever, so she tricked me into making Jim I was just the cover mother Jones broke down, and she said that she was jealous that Dipset was finished and that she wanted to feel powerful for once. The judge looked at Manon and said, "Are you aware of these messages?" as Chrissy remained mute and wept beneath her breath once again. "I am now. Do you dispute their content?" she said, nodding. She paused, closed her eyes, and then muttered, "No." That's when Jim's lawyer rose again. "Your Honor, with your consent, we would also like to forward a signed contract between Mr. Jones and Miss Lannon detailing their future co-ownership of Netflix. This contract for the documentary series includes exclusivity conditions, emotional representation terms, and brand ownership obligations that we now feel were violated. And if Chrissy had broken the terms of the contract while filming a show about their long-standing love, this wasn't simply legal sabotage, but emotional warfare." The court looked at the contract and questioned Anne Lampkin. "Did you interact with Mr. Dial's Mr. Cameron during the planning and promotion of this series?" Chrissy inhaled deeply before making the declaration that made this yes. The entire trial was historic, and I knew that everything would fall apart if Jim learnt about it. There would be no more rumors, no more blurry footage, and no more conjecture. She cried about the affair with Cameron right out of her mouth, before the series was pitched, before the trailer, and before the reunion special. She lied on TV in court to a man who earlier said, "Chrissy saved my life. Jim didn't stand, didn't react, he just wants to grow together." Said, "I knew it," to no one in particular, and then walked out without a statement, publicist, or security. Saw the destruction of a life he thought was real. The court requested a 5-minute recess, but for VH1, it was already too late. Sponsors started sending out emails with images of internal group discussions once Chrissy's full confession reached the media. Producers showed up online, and one post stated, "Mom is ghosting everyone, and I think she's finished." Then the former VH1 knockout hit. If this footage gets online, we're looking at class action lawsuits. Don't realize that this wasn't just a show, it was a planned suffering. They had Jim believe in love only to get good camera angles, and Chrissy performed SS Christie's confession hashtag had amassed 7 million views by the evening, and videos of her narrative were all over TikTok, topped with subtitles like, "She wanted fame, he wanted forever." And melancholy music with glitchy edits and a black hoodie went live the same evening with dim lighting. He logged out after I informed you she wasn't built, and the tape had 3 views, 2 million views, before Mama Scott finally spoke. I was not aware of Miss Lampkins's 2-censor news release, but no one took her seriously. Behind the scenes, I assist with any continuing legal inquiries, because abruptly interns and producers' aides were skulking out of the woodwork, spilling tea, and letters revealing deleted scenes, one of which is a cutaway from a Netflix scene, in which Jim asks Chrissy directly, "Do you still love me?" And she responds, "Yes." Admirers think that after saying it, she looked to the left as though seeking a sign that it wasn't sincere, and much worse, the editor of that Chrissy paused and said off camera, "I hope that's enough for now," as the show revealed that they had cut out the next line. Everything changed abruptly when the love story clarified that VH1's ride or die branding was pointless. Jim is said to have said his team issued a statement stating that he is not accepting interviews and instead concentrates on healing therapy after the well-edited lie was completely removed. In order to preserve what remains of Chrissy, there has been no publishing, no publicity, no denial, just a calm Instagram story for the evening following the verdict. "You may love someone and still shatter them," the message said on a black and white backdrop. The internet didn't like it. Comments were hurried into DEET. Jim deserved more, and Cam took advantage of you by allowing him to allegedly obtain a distribution deal for A in the teaser trailer for the documentary series. The footage they tried to, Chrissy's face is frozen in mid-sentence. "If Jim's going to leave me, cut to the voice of the darkness cam, I learned the conclusion of the whole series trailer released next month, but VH1 says nothing, since the court heard more than just the world made a confession, but now nobody is observing. The performance they're seeing, the repercussions of the final. Was there a question about whether it would ever be real? Ultimately, no reality TV program may write. This type of heartbreak is unattainable for producers. Save you from the story's receipts is complete, the brand has vanished, and the truth is now and permanently out. Permanently out.